What we can control is how we behave. And so we can come to a difficult conversation with a colleague or a parent or a student using this framework to the best of our ability that supports moving through whatever the challenge may be that's facing us.
If you're not willing to have the difficult conversations, you're doing a disservice to your team, to your young people, to whatever community you're a part of by avoiding that conversation.
Yeah.
And that's I don't know if it's a little bit harsh, but it's reality.
It's normal to feel an emotional response to something when we haven't dealt with or maybe been in those situations before or know how to manage that. If we are not someone who's good at confrontation, we're going to get good by the end of this.
Podclass acknowledges the true and traditional custodians of the land we meet on here today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respect to elders past and present and are grateful to be on this country.
So no one told you teaching was gonna be this way. Your lesson plans are jokes, your patience broke, you're feeling in disarray. It's like you're always stuck in report writing, when it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your school year. But I'll be here for you
when the students start to riot.
I'll be here for you
Even if your coffee has gone cold.
I'll be here for you, 'cause you're there for them too.
Hello and welcome back to Podclass. You are joined by myself. My name is Amanda and Skye Hughes. Sorry,
That was so formal. Hello.
I just fumbled over your name.
It is an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Fair enough. You've only known me for, 13 years.
Okay,
so
I mean,
out.
I guess, I just forgot for a second that you were my business partner and best friend. We are the co-founders of Youth Engagement Project, and we're joined, as always, by Will Massara,
G'day.
who is the founder of Youth Leadership Academy Australia. Welcome to the one about having difficult conversations.
The best part about difficult conversations is the more you have them, the better you get at them.
That's so true.
very
And
true.
the reason we're covering this is we have had a whole bunch of people kind of DM and reach out about wanting to cover this topic. We know that difficult conversations, it's like not human nature to naturally lean into a difficult conversation,
Oh, they
right?
suck.
It's called a difficult conversation for a reason. But the fact of the matter is regardless of what your role is in a school, regardless of what you do in your life, you are going to have a difficult conversation at some point. In a school, like that's maybe with a parent, with a colleague, with a student, but you have to have them.
And I think, that can be a bit of a tough pill to swallow sometimes, that we have to have them sometimes. And what we can, if you don't like confrontation like me, what we can sometimes do is lean out of those conversations, avoid those conversations. And what that actually does is build an underlying sense of resentment between you and that person. And so it can become quite divisive. And that's just not healthy and not collaborative. So what we are encouraging, and this is for myself as much as anyone else, is to, approach those difficult conversations knowing that we can if we do it in the right way, it can be done to actually build relationship rather than, I guess, be negative for relationships.
And like everything, this builds if we have a culture of this being something that takes place in our workplace and we all kind of have a model or something that we lean into, it makes it way less confrontational
100%.
and way less awkward because it becomes about the bigger picture. We're doing this to help continue to create a great community, to serve our students, to get rid of a problem that's existing and find a solution, whatever it is.
And if you're not willing to have the difficult conversations, you're doing a disservice to your team, to your young people, to whatever community you're a part of by avoiding that conversation.
Yeah.
And that's I don't know if it's a little bit harsh, but that's reality.
Yeah, it's true. And I think so. First of all, what we're going to do is so often when we think about a difficult conversation, probably what comes to mind is like a fight or an argument or something that's really quite combative and absolutely not healthy for a relationship. So what we are looking to do in this episode is share a strategy that means that we can have a difficult conversation without it being combative. In fact, ideally with it actually building the relationship with the person that we're chatting with.
Yeah. And so the model we're going to unpack comes from the idea of nonviolent communication, which was an approach developed by someone called Marshall Rosenberg. You can look it up. It's very popular, this nonviolent communication model, for good reason, because obviously this approach really focuses on fostering empathy and understanding and building connection and relationship, moving away from that tendency towards the kind of more severe end of confrontation, which can lead to, aggressive aggressive conversations can lead to those aggressive conversations, right? And we don't want to create that, or even that feeling that can bubble up when something is left unsaid. We all know what it's like when we bite our tongue instead of, having the conversation, or we swallow it back down. And that's not a great feeling for us. And then we also know that energetically that can then carry out and can influence our classroom, our workplace, our home life. So we know how much healthier it is to just have the conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
And I feel like this is quite stereotypical, but I feel like we are more inclined to let it bubble up in our personal life and in our professional life, whether it be with a colleague or a parent or a student. We're more inclined to swallow it, which means there's more chance of building resentment and building narratives and stories in our head that may not even be true. And as we do that, furthering the divide between us and that other person.
Until it explodes, right? Until we've pushed it that far down where it's like,
or until we leave the workplace.
Yeah, 100%.
Or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
the framework.
the framework.
So the framework. So
Phase
this
number
is,
1.
Yeah, and you may listen through this and be like, oh, it's a bit formulaic, or it's a bit, stepped out. And the thing is that if we are not someone who's good at confrontation, we're going to get good by the end of this. But if we're not someone who's used to stepping into that space and having that difficult conversation, this is a starting place. This is a tool that you can go, I have no idea how to approach this phone call I'm about to have with this parent. I have no idea how to bring up with my colleague that they are consistently late to the first class after homeroom, and so I'm missing out on the first 5 minutes of my class as I wait for them to arrive. Whatever it is, if we don't have any idea how to have that conversation, then this is the starting place, because it just gives you a tool to make it really simple and step it out, so that we're not overcomplicating it and we're focusing on solutions and relationship.
Yeah.
And it is just a structure that follows, from that nonviolent communication guidelines. It follows I guess an unfoldment. There's that word that we don't even know if it's real.
It's your favorite, the unfoldment.
I know, oh my gosh. It follows a journey of, I guess, leaning in that isn't emotion first.
Yeah.
Because so often when it does bubble up or blow up, it is that emotion first, which isn't a healthy response.
Yeah.
No, and we know that those emotions, we can dive into it, and we may do so in another episode. That comes from so many places. And when we look at where our reactivity comes from, often it's stemmed from our own childhood experiences and stuff we haven't dealt with.
We're going there. No,
we're not going there.
We're not going there.
We're not going there. But that's something that we just need to just acknowledge that it's normal to feel an emotional response to something when we haven't dealt with or maybe been in those situations before or know how to manage that. So bringing it back to this tool just allows us to kind of distance ourselves, to have some space, identify what it is we're actually experiencing, and then articulate that and express that in a really healthy way with the person we have to have that conversation with.
So here's the structure, and following sharing the structure, we're going to unpack how to use this in a really conversational way.
The first stage is our observation. I think this is like when we're entering a conversation, it's what do we see? What are the facts of it? And why we do this is because it can become really hard and angry if you're like, you're always late. Okay, that could be subjective. Over, I see that you've been late 3 times this week, Marshall.
Sorry, Masara.
So the first part is observation.
Okay. The second step is feeling. So once we've observed the facts are non-deniable. Okay, I was late 3 times this week. So then, Will, what you would do next is you would share how that makes you feel. And really when you do that, it's about owning your feelings and what's happening for you.
I feel quite disappointed that you've let me down 3 times this week.
Oh, I'm just letting everyone know, by the way, this is a fake scenario. I don't know where it's come from, but we're rolling with it because we're here.
And you'll notice that even though Will said you in this, when we do talk about our feelings, it's all about, we're making it about ourselves in
really,
that moment.
What I should have said is I feel frustrated when this happens.
Yeah.
Excellent. followed by feelings, followed by...
The next step is our needs, and this is identifying and communicating the need that sits behind our feelings. Because what we know is that when we have an emotional response, when we feel something about something that's going on, an experience, typically it's because a need of ours or an expectation that we have about how something should go hasn't happened. And that's what causes that rub, and that's what causes the feeling to come up. So if the need is, like, for example, in this scenario with you, Will, and, you know, accusing Amanda of being late, no, not accusing, having a conversation with Amanda about being late, your need might be that in your life you really need to be able to rely on the people that you work with, and that sense of reliability is really important to you. So it might be like, hey, Amanda, I've observed, these are the facts, I've observed that you've arrived, you know, our agreed meeting time's 2:00 and you've arrived after 2:00 3 days this week. And I just feel a little bit frustrated by that because I really need that sense of reliability from the people in my team.
And that leads us to the fourth part of this, which is request. So once we've journeyed through our observation, feeling, and the need that sits behind that feeling, we have an opportunity to make a request of that individual. And that's about, it's something clear, it's something actionable, it's a way that they can show up next time that meets their needs to avoid not only this difficult conversation, but the feeling that you're experiencing.
And it has to be something that like meets like whatever the scenario is. It can't be like, and my need is that now you withdraw $50,000 to repay me for that inconvenience. Or, you know, I will need you to actually cover my classes for the rest of the term or whatever it is. It's got to be like on the same level as
and
what
give them some autonomy to make the choice to actually commit to it too, because then they're going to have ownership over that choice. And like with Amanda being late 3 times this week, the request could be like, Amanda, do you think we could consider and set a new time that you can agree to meet?
Absolutely.
Good news.
Yeah.
And I think as well, this last step is often the one that's missed in conversations. And I know any parents that are listening will understand what that's like when you're like, I've asked you to clean your room like 15 times or whatever it might be. When we don't have like the request, the way that we think that things should happen and that agreement at the end, the action step, well, nothing kind of changes. So if we just do the observations, we talk about our feelings, talk about what we need, but then there's no action step. So what does that mean moving forward? Well, we can expect the same thing to happen. So this request step is actually so important if we actually want change to happen, which means that A, we're building a relationship, we're building trust, we're building a community of relying on one another, whatever it is. And we don't have to then have this quote unquote difficult conversation again because we're on the same team.
Yeah, and I think this is where autonomy is so important, because realistically Amanda's going to come around and be like, actually that time is right for me, but now Amanda's made the decision. I haven't told her a time.
And I think it's important to acknowledge at this point before Amanda responds that there is a circle of control for all of us.
Yeah.
And what we can control is how we behave. And so we can come to a difficult conversation with a colleague or a parent or a student using this framework to the best of our ability, in a conversational manner that supports moving through whatever the challenge may be that's facing us, supports seeking a change moving into the future to support best outcomes, knowing that how they respond is not in our circle of control. And in an ideal situation, we would have, a highly emotionally intelligent individual who's able to take ownership and acknowledge their behaviors and, meet our request and everything like that. And chances are through using this model, we will see an increase in their commitment to what comes next, but we also can't control how they respond.
It also is such great modelling to use with our students. I know this is a tool that I've referred to time and time again when something maybe there's like been a behaviour or maybe something's happened in class, and instead of letting, which often happens, that emotion arises. And again, we're the adults in this space, so it's important for us to know to regulate ourselves. The way that we feel is never our students' fault. Yeah, it's up to us. We control that feeling in our bodies. So, but when we are ready to have that conversation, really using this to help make that proactive and create a culture of this kind of feedback and support and relationship building in your classroom. So say I've got a student who, they're consistently not submitting work on time or something like that. I might just have the conversation, and because Amanda, you seem to be in the hot seat today. If you're my student, it might just be like,
be your student, and I will also be the person who's consistently not submitting my work.
So I'll use that strategy and I'll be like, hey, Amanda, I've just noticed for the last couple of English assignments that we've had that they've been submitted after the due date. And I just feel a little bit concerned about that, and I'm a little bit frustrated that I'm chasing up that work. And what I really need, or what I'd really like to see, what I really need is just to make sure that A, you're supported, but B, that I'm able to get that work in on time, just so it's fair for all the students in the classroom that I've got to teach. And I would love to ask, or I'd just love to request that if you do plan on submitting late, that you can have a conversation with me about it, because we can organise an extension if you do need it. Or if you do need a little bit more time or whatever it might be, then we can kind of work that out together. How does that sound to you?
Sounds good, Miss Hughes.
But what you see there is like all of I know we're quite deep into the series of Podclass now, but it's like we're not making the student wrong. We're giving them autonomy. We're respecting them. We're building a relationship with them. We're having empathy for we don't necessarily know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's like all of the things are compiled into like how to have a difficult
and the
conversation.
difference between that approach in terms of building and maintaining a relationship and building trust with that student, as opposed to coming in and going, Amanda, this is the 4th time you've submitted your English assessment wrong.
Or I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed.
You know, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. You know, and you can hear it in your tone and your body language and your approach.
I'm disappointed with you. It's like as soon as you... Nope.
Yeah. So we also need to know for ourselves as educators to really be in that calm, regulated space as well when we do have those conversations, because that's going to best serve our students, our colleagues, whoever it is, our spouses, whatever, when we are approaching those challenging topics too.
And I think to the point that you made, Skye, right at the beginning around, you know, I guess everything that's been around for any kind of time has some criticisms about it. And I guess the criticisms that have emerged around this particular formula is that it could be a little too formulaic, and it could be a little too clinical in response to a conversation. And I think how you just modeled it was really beautiful. You know, you didn't sit there with me as your student and say, I have made an observation that, da-da-da. You said, you said, oh, I've noticed that, da-da-da-da-da. And I feel, da-da-da-da-da. And what I really just need is, da-da-da-da-da. And, you know, that I think give it a practice, give it a whirl, because once we can, like, the only way to introduce it is through the formula. And once we've grasped the formula and once we know it and embody it, the more we do that, we can kind of let go of that and turn it into more of a conversational experience. And, you know, it's going to feel really different to maybe if in the past we have approached a situation of, Amanda, 4 times late, what's going on? Maybe if that's somewhere we've gone in the past, then, you know, it might feel a bit clunky or a bit inauthentic or a bit formulaic to give this a go, but give it a go, because why not?
And you'll also learn, like, the more you do it, where you need to adapt it. Where you need to adapt it to be able to suit your flow and to be able to make it not sound like a formula and a structured doof. But what we know is, like, it's backed up. It works. We've all used it in our lives. Absolutely. And it's a really way to just try. If something isn't working, try another way.
Yeah, and you go.
I would just say I really would love to just speak to that parent caregiver kind of piece as well, just because we've had so many people specifically say, how do we communicate maybe challenging conversations with parents of our students? And I think for the first part of that is a real reminder that we're on the same team. And just I always preface any conversation, a challenging conversation with a parent, even if we maybe have to deliver news that they will find challenging to hear, maybe about their child, that it's really important to preface that conversation with, one, we're calm and we're regulated and we hold space, because it's often not the way that parents are. And in doing that, we can kind of co-regulate that conversation and help bring it to what it's really about. But really going, hey, we're on the same team before we have this conversation. I just wanted to let you know that, you know, I really care about, you know, X student and how they feel at school. But I do have to have a bit of a challenging conversation with you to make sure that we can get on the same team and come up with a plan together, you know, for what our approach might be. And suddenly any kind of like that concern or whatever that can fire when we hear things about our child, and the instinct obviously is to be protective and to want to look after them. And I know many teachers feel this when they're having these conversations, just helps to distill that and remind them that, hey, we're actually facing this problem together and we're here for support.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to acknowledge before we go that this model could feel, I want to talk about the feelings piece and the depth to which we go into the feelings piece, which could feel really uncomfortable in the context of maybe a leader or school leadership and possibly feel a little out of place with that. So when using this model, feel free to, if we need to use it with, you know, a leader, a school leader, a principal even, and we're kind of quite uncomfortable about going in depth with how something is making us feel, you know, we can kind of go there but scooch over it a bit more. For example, if I was having a conversation with a principal, it might sound something like, I've just really noticed that our staff meetings lately have been running over time every week, and it's just I'm feeling a bit unsure about how to move forward with this because I really need certainty in my finishing time because I have other commitments. And so I'm just requesting that if it's going to be a later finish in the future, can you please just let me know so that I can have that certainty.
And so respectful, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not confrontational. It's just
Yeah.
opening up the dialogue, but it's also acknowledging the elephant in the room, as opposed to having a group of staff or having yourself sit there and be like, oh, I really should say something. Oh, I really should say something.
and never
And
do
build
it.
it up. And then it almost becomes like this insurmountable task in our head because we've built it up over so much time, and suddenly that challenging or that difficult conversation is just like, it's actually way harder than what it would have been if we just
And
had
unfortunately,
it
by
when we
not
were ready.
saying it, you're giving permission each and every time to keep going over time.
100%.
You know, and that's one example that we can all relate to.
Yeah, of
but there's many, you know, apply this to your context and whatever that is. And if you're listening and you're like, I really need to have that conversation. I've been putting that off. Maybe listen to
Today's
this.
your day.
Obviously, check the show notes, but use this nonviolent communication model because it works. It helps bring structure to that conversation. And even if the words aren't perfect, like we just said, it may just help guide and be a real starting step for that process.
Thank you for coming along. And even though it's really challenging, use this model, have the difficult conversation because it's worth it and you deserve it and you deserve to share what you need.
And Amanda, just don't be late again, okay?
Sorry.
We are Podclass.
won't be
We
late
will
again.
see you next week.
I'll return my
See you
assignment
then.
on time.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll be here for you, 'cause you're there for them too.
Thanks so much for tuning into Podclass. If you've enjoyed this episode, we would adore it if you could go on to Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a review. 5 stars would be lovely. We would love to get this podcast into as many ears as possible so we can help and support as many people as possible who help young people. And if you're not already doing so, please go along to Instagram and follow us at podclass.aus.